What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound brought to you by the Hockey News. I am your host, Emma Lingan. I'm joined today by Michael Augello and Stephen Kerr of the Hockey News. And just as a reminder that for over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix. Now you can get 12 issues delivered straight to you, packed with stories, stats, and a bonus gift issue to kick things off. Head over to thn.com and get in on the action. All right, guys, lots to talk about today around the NHL. Going to start in a division with which Stephen and I are extra familiar. That would be the Central Division, always a gauntlet. But this year in particular, it has really become the toughest division in the NHL. I mean, the top three teams in the Central Division, so Colorado, Dallas, and Minnesota, also happen to be the teams with the three best records in all of the NHL right now. So Colorado 19-1-6, Dallas 17-5-5, Minnesota 15-7-5, just really been off to these really strong starts. So Mike, I'll ask you first, which team of those three do you think is under the most pressure to translate their hot start into playoff success this year?
Well, I think all of them are under different kinds of pressure, but if I had to pick one, I would say it's Colorado, simply because of that first round exit they had last year in Game 7 with Mikko Rantanen, sort of skewering them. And that was like the ultimate in sort of bad optics. I mean, they've had this fantastic regular season so far, McKinnon and Makar and Natchez, and they're getting fantastic goaltending out of Wedgwood. I think it's really I think the pressure and the focus is so much on them as sort of they're the team to come out of the West, and if they don't come out of the West, I think people will start to question. I mean, Dallas has their own pressures with, they've gotten to conference finals under Peter DeBoer and can't get to the Stanley Cup final. In Minnesota, I think the pressure for them is, well, you just paid Kirill Kaprizov a ridiculous sum of money, and can they get further with the highest paid player at this point in the NHL?
Yeah, different kinds of pressure for sure for each of these teams. And you've got other teams as well in the Central who are fighting. You've got Utah really trying to make a statement this year as well. Chicago taking a step forward. And then we've got Winnipeg, Nashville, St. Louis. We don't really need to talk about them. But Stephen, what do you think of those top three teams, Dallas, Minnesota, Colorado? Which team do you think is under the most pressure to really translate this hot start into playoff success?
I'm going to take a different tack and say Dallas. I mean, I know that, they have a new coach in Glenn Gulletson, or, well, new for the second time around. But the fact that they have gone to the Western Conference Finals so many years without coming out of them, I think that puts a lot of pressure on them. But, the thing with Dallas, and of course, I know a lot of other teams around the NHL having the same issue, but the injuries are really starting to pile up. Tyler Seguin is now the latest one, is going to be out indefinitely. You've had Thomas Harley, Matt Duchene, Liam Bichel. Jamie Benn was out to start the season. Now he's back. But I think the Stars will be okay. But at some point, if the injuries keep mounting up the way they do, I'm not sure, if they're going to win the division. I still think they're going to come out and be in the playoffs. But I just think they're under the most pressure. I would have to say Colorado, though, would be right behind them, for the reasons that Mike just said. And a good point about each of those teams having a different kind of pressure.
Definitely a tough, pressure-filled division there in the Central. One team that's at the other end of the division, at the bottom, also at the bottom or near the bottom of the league standings, of course, is the Nashville Predators. But they did get a win over the Calgary Flames on Tuesday. And in that game, with a second period goal, forward Steven Stamkos, he eclipsed 1,200 career points. So that was his 1,190th NHL game, and he got 1,200 points. So he joins other active players, guys you may have heard of, guys like Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Alex Ovechkin, Anze Kopitar, Patrick Kane. All of those guys are active players who have hit that 1,200 point milestone. But obviously, Steven Stamkos overall not having a great year, great couple of years really since he's come to Nashville. He's got just 7 goals and 10 points in 26 games with Nashville this season, and it's hard to imagine that he had 81 points in 79 games just 2 seasons ago with Tampa. So this has obviously been a discussion now since he came to Nashville last year. But Mike, do you think Stamkos has more to give? Do you think this is just him sort of dropping off as he gets older? And do you think that it's possible for him to return to that form regardless of whether he stays in Nashville?
I think he's at the point in his career now where he's a high-end complementary player and not a centerpiece player. And we know that Nashville is paying him to be a centerpiece player like he was when he scored 40 goals in that final season with Tampa Bay. But if you look at what he was in Tampa Bay, I mean, he did score 40 goals, but he, Kucherov and Hagel and Hedman were sort of ahead of him in the pecking order. He was, the guy that they drafted first overall, and I think it was 2008. And, he's going to go to the Hall of Fame, wearing a Tampa Bay Lightning jersey. But, he's getting to the point, and all the injuries that had compiled in his career, I mean, it's going to take a toll at a certain point. And unfortunately, Nashville is the one who's reaping the benefits, or negatively so, of maybe the injuries wearing him down. I mean, I don't think he's going to have any success in Nashville because they're depending on him to be the Steven Stamkos of a few years ago. I think the only way he has any success is if he gets traded someplace and can be that complimentary player. But whether he'll allow that to happen with his no move clause, I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, it's an interesting point you bring up. I think that's exactly right, that Stamkos needs to be a complementary player, not a centerpiece. And you're starting to see a little bit of it, kind of glimpses of it, as Nashville starts to lean towards a youth movement. They start to bring up these younger players or elevate the young players they have into more prominent roles. And as a result, you've started to see Stamkos kind of step up in his production as well, when he is a complementary piece to players like Luke Evangelista, for example. So, Stephen, what do you think? Do you think that there is a chance that Stamkos can return to being the same player he was a couple seasons ago, or is this just kind of the new chapter in his career?
Well, I think when you see a player the caliber of a Steven Stamkos have one bad season, or at least a season where their production definitely dips, sometimes you can chalk it up to saying, well, he's trying to adjust, maybe the injuries thing, maybe some personal things going on. But when it goes over more than one season, especially when you're at the age Steven Stamkos is, it's more than just that. It is clearly that Stamkos is not the Steven Stamkos, the star caliber player that you're used to seeing in Tampa. And Emma, I think you hit upon the point really well that, now that the Predators are moving toward a youth movement, if some of these guys, whether it's Matthew Wood, Evangelista, Reed Schaefer has come on in the last few games. If some of these guys can start producing, if you can't move Stamkos, then perhaps you can accept the fact that he can be put in a complementary role, maybe be a mentor to some of these younger guys, the way that Philip Forsberg and Ryan O'Reilly are. But yeah, I think with the Stamkos you're getting is not the Stamkos you thought you were getting when he signed with the Predators. And I think, they've tried desperately to get him going. They even put him at center a couple of times. I mean, Andrew Brunette has pretty much worn out just about every possibility trying to get him going. But I think at this point, this is who you have.
Yeah, this is who you have. And unfortunately, Nashville not getting the kind of production that they need from their top forward, one of their top forwards in Steven Stamkos. However, one team that is getting production from their top forwards, and I'm sure Nashville is looking longingly over toward Detroit, because the Red Wings, they're getting incredible production from guys like Dylan Larkin. He's got 14 goals, 30 points. Lucas Raymond, 9 goals, 29 points. Alex DeBrincat, 13 goals, 28 points. All of these guys are performing. They're scoring at above a point per game pace. That being said, Patrick Kane and Emmett Finney, only other forwards with more than 10 points. So it's kind of a top-heavy lineup there, to say the least. So, Mike, while the Red Wings' biggest issues have historically been in net, and that was something they tried to address in the offseason, how concerning do you see the lack of depth scoring to be for this team?
I think it's potentially fatal. I mean, it's sort of like hockey whack-a-mole here. You finally solve the goaltending problem and add Gibson and Talbot, and I think that's a solid pairing because you don't have to rely too much on Gibson to play 50 to 60 games. You can sort of tandem them. I mean, right now, it's that top three. You got Sider. Patrick Kane has only played 18 games. He's at a point per game pace, but at his age, I don't know if you can depend on him to play every game between now and the end of the regular season. And the dramatic drop off of Marco Kasper, who almost scored 20 goals last year and has 3 points in 27 games right now, is just dazzling how much he's dropped off. And, they have some young players like Brandzik Nygaard, but it's too early in his career to really step up to the NHL. And they really don't, if you look at their roster, they added James Van Riemsdyk, who I think is sort of past it now. They really don't have anybody as a go-to player after those three. So I think, the focus of Steve Yzerman before the deadline, if Detroit is going to compete for a playoff spot, is to add scoring. But as we know, second line centers and scoring wingers, the price is prohibitive.
It seems like every year we think, are we going to see this Yzer plan? And like you said, whack-a-mole, one thing gets fixed and something else falls apart or falls short. So, Stephen, how concerned are you, if you're the Red Wings, how concerned are you about this lack of depth scoring, even though your top forwards are performing so well?
Well, it certainly is a concern. They've even taken to shuffling lines to try and solve it. But, a lot of their troubles seem to be just, I've noticed some overall sloppy play. You've got too many giveaways, failing to execute on faceoffs. It's a lot of it, I think, Emma, is the little things that keep you from going. Great goaltending can only hide so much of that. And Mike, you mentioned Marco Kasper. That they were expecting a lot more from him after the late season spurt. But, with 3 goals, unless he's just suddenly gone back to less than what they thought he would be. Right now, what is he on a pace to go? 10 points? I don't see that. But the sloppy play, they're just the lack of fundamentals, and even the defense. Opponents are just being allowed to attack the net very frequently. So, yeah, there are a couple of other things, but certainly it all has to get back to the offense and how top heavy it is at this point.
Well, the Detroit Red Wings, of course, one of the teams in the East, hopeful to get back into the playoff mix this year. Another one of those teams, of course, is the New York Rangers, who fell woefully short of expectations last year after winning the President's Trophy the year before, didn't even make the playoffs. So they're trying to claw their way back in. Of course, they were having a 4-game losing streak. They've finally, though, won 4 of their last 5. They're back out of the basement of the Eastern Conference. And unfortunately, one guy who played a very large role in that has been injured. So Adam Fox, of course, had a big role in that win streak, or that winning 4 out of 5. He put together 15 points in his last 11 games. He's now 3rd in scoring among all NHL defensemen with 26 points in 27 games. However, he ended up separating his shoulder on November 29th against the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Rangers have shut him down for a couple of weeks. I believe the plan is to reevaluate him around Christmas and see where he is in his recovery. So, Mike, do you think it's possible for the Rangers to go on a run even without Fox in the lineup? How important was he to their offensive production, and do you think they'll be able to survive without him?
he was their offensive production from the blue line. If you look at their blue, and then we talked about this when we were doing sort of season previews, you look at their defense, the top pairing was Gavrikov and him. And I picked him to be sort of the bounce back player in terms of blue liners, because, you know, he's a Norris Trophy caliber defenseman, and he sort of fell off a little bit last year, but still had a, you know, like in the 60s point wise. But he didn't have as good a year as he normally has. And I said he was going to bounce back. And so far, I think he has. But he leaves a cavernous hole on that Rangers blue line. They really don't have anybody to step into that offensive role. So I think it's going to hurt them. I think it's going to put more pressure on Igor Shesterkin to be Superman. Now the big question is, because he was penciled in as one of the 8 defensemen for Team USA for the upcoming Olympics, whether he can get back by early February. You know, if they're actually going to go to Milan with that joke of a rink that is a few feet shorter than what it's supposed to be. But it's a question of whether he can get back or not. And I'm sure Team USA is monitoring what's going on with Adam Fox.
Yeah, definitely. But of course, the more immediate concern would be from his team, from the Rangers. Steven, do you think they can survive without Fox for an extended period of time, even if he is back in time for the Olympics?
You know, the Rangers are the one team that I keep waiting and waiting to, you know, figure it out, find themselves. And just when you think they might be doing that, something like this happens. Obviously, it's going to put more pressure on the others to step up. You know, Gavrikov, he scored the overtime winner against Dallas. That was a big goal. You know, Will Kyle's going to have to step up more. He's been playing a little bit better of late. I mean, there was a stretch, though, where, you know, again, turnovers were a big deal for them. So they've got to keep those down. It just seems, I don't know if it's that they're still trying to find their identity under Mike Sullivan, because sometimes they do the dump and chase routine. Sometimes they're too aggressive and they end up getting reckless. So, you know, are they going to be able to find that balance? And now that you lose Fox, you know, that's just going to add to it. So, yeah, it's a big question mark. And losing him certainly is going to affect how they are moving forward.
Well, want to talk about another Eastern Conference playoff hopeful, which honestly right now could be any team in the Eastern Conference. It's so tightly compacted. But of course, one of the teams that made that step, made the playoffs last year, is the Montreal Canadiens. However, in the last month, Montreal has given up the most goals in the NHL, despite the fact that they are 11th in goals for. So just looking at their goaltending situation, you've got Jakub Dobeš, who's got an 888 save percentage, 3.22 goals against in 13 games. And then you have Sam Montembeault, who was supposed to be the starter. And after taking a big step forward last year, he's got an 861 save percentage and a 3.61 goals against in 14 games, which has led his kind of step backwards, has led to a little bit more of an even split, a tandem between those two guys. So with both of those guys, Montembeault and Dobeš, very young, very cheap, do we think, Mike, that the Canadiens can find a trade partner to upgrade in net? And if so, who would they target?
Well, I'm stunned that the Cinderella Canadiens have turned into a pumpkin. I mean, I looked at their goaltending, and remember, Montembeault had a phenomenal season last year. Dobeš came up from Laval and played very well. They got everything that they could have expected out of goaltending that was sort of questionable, and now it's sort of receded back to where we thought it was going to be, which is questionable. They're an organization that have a lot of assets. They have a lot of draft picks. They have a lot of prospects. So if we're talking going after Jordan Binnington, who we don't know whether St. Louis is going to trade. I mean, how many teams can trade for Jordan Binnington? I mean, everybody, you know, Edmonton lines up, Montreal. I'm sure there are a few other teams as well. But you know, that's one possibility. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in Buffalo. You know, they've got 3 goaltenders, but I don't know whether Buffalo is willing to trade him inside the division. There are other teams that have 3 goalies that they might be able to go towards, but their dilemma is they have Jacob Fowler, who is a well-regarded prospect, in their organization in Laval. I think they see him as the future in goal within a couple years. Do you want to tie yourself to a veteran who's got long-term on his deal? But if the focus is here and now, then they may go hunting for a rental. As for who, I'm not sure.
Well, talked about Laurent Brossoit the other day and getting his sort of audition in the AHL as part of Chicago's organization. So sometimes names like that will pop up. But Stephen, what do you think? What's your concern level for Montreal's goaltending situation? Do you think they try to resolve it with a trade?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult for them to, Emma. I mean, yeah, they do have some assets, but like getting someone like a Bennington, is that even the right move for them? Because there's a number of questions about Bennington, that you're talking about. I mean, it's interesting because some of the latest trade rumors I'm hearing are that they're interested in Canucks forward Kiefer Sherwood. I think Pierre LeBrun was talking about that. So, maybe they're trying to get better offensively to hide those weaknesses. But yeah, the goaltending has been an issue, but also I know that Cole Caulfield has been publicly critical of the defense and the way they've been losing puck battles and missing coverages. And, that was the case, I know, when they lost to the Senators recently. So, I mean, yeah, you compare Montembeault and Dobes, they're very similar. They both have had a step back. Fowler, I mean, do you take a chance on him? Is he ready? He's got a 215 GAA, 920 percentage. I mean, if he continues to do well at Laval, maybe they're willing to take a shot this season, but I'm sure they are going to eye some kind of a veteran. But as Mike said, the question is who?
Yeah, and just to add about the defensive question, I mean, this is the thing you looked at, after the acquisition of Noah Dobson. Your top three defensemen for the Canadiens, Lane Hudson is a smallish, phenomenal offensive defenseman, but defense and, being able to push people from around the net has always been a question. Noah Dobson is an offensive defenseman primarily. He had, I think, 70 points with the Islanders one year. And Mike Matheson, who they just re-signed on another deal, he is an offensive defenseman as well. You don't have these stay-at-home defensemen who can sort of counterbalance the offensive guys. And if you don't have that, then you don't have a defense. So I think that's a factor in their goalie situation and their success overall.
Throw Alex Carrier in there as well, a little bit more of an offensive defenseman. So definitely a glaring weakness there, a couple of glaring weaknesses I think we're starting to see in Montreal. So that's a team that has certainly taken a bit of a step backwards, as you said, Mike, turned from Cinderella back into a pumpkin. One team, though, that I think has actually taken a step forward, which this seems like about the timeline where you would want to start seeing this team take a step forward, and that's the Chicago Blackhawks. And one guy in particular, one guy not named Connor Bedard, because we already know Connor Bedard is doing phenomenally, but one guy who has really found his footing alongside Bedard is Tyler Bertuzzi. So Bertuzzi's got 11 goals in his last 12 games. It's the third most in the league since November 3rd, behind only fellow Central Division forwards Nathan McKinnon with 12 in Colorado and Jason Robertson with 13 in Dallas. So, Mike, do you see Bertuzzi as someone who the Blackhawks would want to keep as a complementary piece on their team? Obviously, they're in this rebuild now, focusing on this younger core. So do you think that Bertuzzi's a guy that they would want to keep around for that? Or do you think they might look to package him into a bigger piece for the franchise, maybe a couple years down the line?
Well, he's got another 2 years left in his contract at a very manageable $5.5 million AAV. So I would think with them on a sort of upward track, they would want to keep him around. The chemistry between him and Bedard is unquestioned, especially with his recent success. And his problem throughout his career has been staying healthy. He seems to have shaken that off. I mean, he had a couple 20-goal seasons and a 30-goal season with Detroit. He was pretty successful in 1 year with Toronto, and then he signed the long-term deal with Chicago. And in spite of the fact the Blackhawks were terrible last year, he scored over 20 goals. So he is a good, dependable veteran forward. And if he is having success with Bedard, I say you keep him around and you sort of build around that. And, if he's still good at age 32, you sign him to another deal.
Steven, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, the conundrum, I think, is if you trade him now, then you could, as Mike said, break up that chemistry that seems to be doing well for the Blackhawks. But then if you also trade him now, you still could get something for him. He's 30, and he's got the 2 years of club control there. So, yeah, it is a good question. I mean, he does have a 10-team no trade clause, so that could complicate things as far as trading him. But I think if you were going to trade him now, or by this trade deadline, would be the time to do it.
Well, speaking of trades and potential trades, one guy that we've already talked about quite a bit, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about for quite a bit here, Quinn Hughes. Of course, much has been said about Hughes not wanting to sign his next contract with the Vancouver Canucks, potentially maybe even going to New Jersey to play with his brothers. But either way, Mike, do you think there's a chance that the Canucks do manufacture a trade by this year's deadline to soften the blow of Hughes not coming back rather than letting him walk for nothing? And do you think there would be any trade or any teams that would be willing to put together a trade package as big as what the Canucks are likely expecting or demanding for him? What would a trade package even look like?
Well, the school of thought is that they will get more before this year's deadline than they would over the summer, because with this year's deadline, you're talking about one playoff and then a full year. And, if it's a team other than New Jersey, a team that is looking to win a Stanley Cup, he has no trade protection. So he gets traded wherever they get the best package. And I've heard rumors of, Colorado. I've heard rumors of Detroit. Obviously, I think he's from Michigan, and the New York Rangers. But I don't know. But I mean, I would be dumbfounded if he gets traded anywhere other than New Jersey. As for the package, well, if you look at the Devils and you look at what Vancouver would expect, I would say probably an NHL forward like a Dawson Mercer, a top prospect, someone like Simone Nemec, and probably a first or even two firsts. But I think they only get that package if they trade him before March the 6th. If it's the summer, then basically Quinn Hughes has a knife at the Canucks' throat, because if he doesn't want to sign there, then it's only 1 year. And then you sort of limit the return that you're going to get because it's only 1 year, other than a team like New Jersey, who probably, as soon as they trade for him, signs him to a 7-year deal. So I think if Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin want more options, they consider trading him before the deadline.
Well, and like you said, a lot of the, I think, general assumption is that he will end up in New Jersey at some point, but it could even see a trade to a different team just to finish out this contract. And then maybe he signs with New Jersey in free agency, always an option. But Steven, do you agree? I mean, that's a pretty hefty asking price, understandably, for a guy of Quinn Hughes' caliber. Do you think that Vancouver's going to be able to find that? And do you think they pull the trigger and make a trade happen this year?
Actually, I think Quinn Hughes has the knife to the Canucks' throat right now. Just because, when you publicly make it clear that you're not interested in re-signing with them, that you publicly would love to play with your brothers, that puts the Canucks in a pretty big bind. And, teams don't have to trade for him. And if they do want to trade for him, just let's say for the rest of this season, they're not going to give up, top draft choices or a top caliber forward to do that. So I think just the fact that, that it's public knowledge that Hughes has a particular place he wants to go and that he's not all that interested in staying in Vancouver, I really think the Canucks are in a pretty tough position right now.
Yeah, like we said, Mike, it seems like it's always something with Vancouver. We always have something to talk about with the Canucks. This year, it's Quinn Hughes. Of course, if you want to read more about the Quinn Hughes saga or any of the other topics that we talked about today and much more, you can head over to the Hockey News. Of course, the Hockey News has been the go-to for all things hockey since 1947. 12 issues packed with game and player insights, plus a free issue to start, is a must-have for any fan. Head over to thn.com/free and get your subscription today. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Wraparound. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in and listened to us talking some hockey. We really do appreciate it. We will be back with an all-new episode next week. For Michael Augello and Stephen Kerr, I'm Emma Lingan. This is the Wraparound, and we will see you next time.